All right, let's go live. How's it going, everybody? Chuck Holton here. I'm coming to you from Frankfurt again because we missed our flight last night out of here. We should have been in Armenia by now, but we had to wait an extra days. Sometimes that happens when you're traveling. Stuff just doesn't always go smoothly. This is the glamour and the glory of air travel, and sometimes it comes back and bites you. But you know what? A 48-hour clock is now ticking down toward a potential war with Iran. President Trump condensed his previous nuclear ultimatum from weeks to just mere days now. And Iran has flatly rejected its zero enrichment, the zero enrichment condition that the Trump administration has set. And they've also been practicing closing the Strait of Hormuz. So obviously, we've got the biggest military buildup in the region since 2003, and there's a lot to unpack with all that. Also, it's the 4-year anniversary today of the invasion of Ukraine, Russia's aggression against their neighbor. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So you're going to want to stay tuned for all of that. Do me a favor, post where you're watching from in the chat. Having all of you posting in the chat where you're coming in from is fun to see, but it also helps the algorithm know that more people need to be shown this content, and that's how we grow. We've been growing a lot, really fast lately. As a matter of fact, we've had about 8,000 new subscribers in the last couple days, and that's more than it took me a year to get to 8,000 subscribers or something like that when I started this channel. So that's pretty awesome to see. All of the craziness going on and the potential for the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz and everything has caused, obviously, a spike in global anxiety. And whenever that happens, the price of gold goes up. Gold is still sitting around $5,100 an ounce. That's, we're in record-breaking territory there. But you can put some of your retirement into a gold IRA. You can do that with Preserve Gold. They're the best ones to go to because they only use physical gold and silver. And that's exactly what you want. You don't want to be putting paper contracts in there or anything like that. Physical gold and silver can go into your IRA. And there's a very good reason to do it because gold is outperforming the S&P over the last 5 years running, which is amazing. But a lot of that has to do with what we're talking about today, what's going on in the world. And they're saying that if President Trump chooses to attack Iran, that the price of oil could spike to over $100 a barrel, more than a 30% rise from where it is right now, almost a 50% rise. And so that could definitely cause a spike in the price of gold as well. So you might want to get in on that as soon as you can. Call my friends at Preserve Gold by going to just text the word Chuck to 50505 and you can get a free wealth protection guide, or go to preservegold.com/hot zone. You'll see my picture there, and I highly recommend it. If you recall, I was a stockbroker for 10 years, and so I have quite a bit of experience of advising people, but I'm not an advisor anymore. So I don't know your specific situation, and that's why you should call Preserve Gold, because they will help you figure out whether or not gold is right for you in your portfolio. Okay, so thank you to Preserve Gold for sponsoring today's podcast. There's been a whole lot going on. Oh my goodness, I'm on my way over to cover the war against Iran, if there is one, and I'm curious whether or not you believe there will be a conflict. So do me a favor, post in the chat just a yes or no if you think President Trump will give the order to strike Iran. I don't mean today, I don't mean tomorrow, I mean at any point in the next 6 months. Do you think the United States is going to war with Iran? Do you think that's going to happen? Because we have 2 carrier strike groups already in the region. The USS Abraham Lincoln is in the Red Sea or the Gulf of Aden or somewhere around there. And the Gerald Ford is in the Mediterranean, approaching the coast of Israel. Between the two of them, they have more than 700 tons of munitions, and that's pretty sizable. And with that in mind, not only do we have all of that, we've got all the aircraft, all the troops. Again, more coming every day. The United States has started to pull some troops out of some of the land bases, like in Qatar and Bahrain. Also, they are evacuating the embassy in Beirut. And we're going to, if we want to talk about what that means, if the United States is evacuating the embassy in Beirut, that means that they believe Hezbollah is going to retaliate if the United States strikes Israel. I'm sorry, strikes Iran. And so Hezbollah would retaliate against Israel or against the U.S. embassy in Beirut. And so they're evacuating that embassy. For their part, the Lebanese government and the Lebanese military are begging Hezbollah not to get involved. Just sit it out like they did the 12-day war. And we'll have to see whether or not that happens. Israel has been ramping up their strikes on Hezbollah operatives in southern Lebanon. And just the other day, they took out like 9 guys that were senior commanders in the missile forces for Hezbollah. And that's going to obviously make it more difficult for Hezbollah to have that command and control that they need if they did decide to strike against Israel. So there's not only all of that stuff going on in the Middle East, but we have, of course, the continuing violence in Mexico. We talked about that over the last couple of days. I know a lot of you are wondering what is going on there. I would highly recommend that you go watch the last couple of videos I put up about the issues in Mexico. That'll give you a very good understanding of what's happening, because yesterday's live was fantastic. We interviewed Oscar Blue Ramirez in Mexico, in Tijuana, and he was actually in the middle of some of these events where the narco traffickers were burning vehicles and setting things on fire in Tijuana. Some of those were just a few steps from the U.S. border fence. So that's pretty concerning. And then we also interviewed Lanny Million, who is a friend of ours who is in Puerto Vallarta and was locked down in a resort there and unable to leave. So not sure if they will be able to get out. So you definitely need to go watch that, but I'm not going to talk about that anymore today because there's just too much to get to between the Iran issue and the Ukraine issue. So let's start with Ukraine real quick. 4 years ago today, I was in Kyiv and had just returned from the frontline areas down in the Donbass. I actually got to Ukraine 3 weeks before the war started. And we traveled around in all the areas that were right along the part that was already occupied by Russia. Because you recall that Russia occupied much of the Donbass region back in 2014. And so there was an ongoing conflict. The conflict actually dates back, this current conflict didn't actually start on February 24th, 2022. That was just when the Russians made a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The war actually started in 2008. And so people in Ukraine have been dealing with this conflict for, a long, long time, many years, much longer than 4. So we were down in Mariupol, we were in Kherson, we were right along the red line. And, of course, Russia was putting out all this propaganda that the Ukrainians were striking civilian areas inside the Donbass. None of that was true. I was there. I was with Ukrainian troops all along that border. And there were daily artillery attacks from the Russian side coming across into Ukraine. but there was very little in terms of the Ukrainians answering them with fire. And there was a couple cases where I was close enough to hear. We heard news that Russia was saying that, for example, there was a Ukrainian bomb that landed on the airport in Luhansk and killed a bunch of people. Well, I was only 2 miles from the airport. I would have heard those explosions if they had been bombing it, and they weren't. There were no explosions. So Russia has a habit of lying through its teeth and just wanting people to believe it. I'll show you one video. This is a video from the first day of the war, when the Russian general in charge of the conflict was saying, look, we're not going to target civilians. We're not, anything like that. I translated this to English. So, and I don't know why it made him sound like he's from an Indian call center, but you'll just have to deal with that. Take a listen.
Armed forces of the Russian Federation are not conducting any missile, air, or artillery strikes against Ukrainian cities. The servicemen of the Border Guard Service of Ukraine have not offered any resistance to the Russian units. Intelligence assets show that individual units and servicemen of the Ukrainian armed forces are massively abandoning their positions, leaving behind their weapons. Positions of Ukrainian units that have surrendered their arms are not subjected to strikes. High-precision weapons of the Russian armed forces are disabling only military infrastructure. These are air defense facilities, military airfields, and aviation of the armed forces of Ukraine. We draw the attention of the mass media that provocations are being prepared and already implemented by the Security Service of Ukraine, following the well-known patterns of the white helmets. In Ukrainian cities, staged video recordings have been conducted, allegedly showing mass casualties among the civilian population of Ukraine. These prepared video clips are being distributed through controlled Telegram channels and social media platforms. Their purpose is to accuse Russia of allegedly indiscriminate and disproportionate strikes intended to intimidate the peaceful population and for broadcast on Western television channels.
Okay, so this is there's not a word that came out of that guy's mouth that was not a lie. I mean, I was there. I went and saw the places that they were striking at the beginning of the war, and they were apartment buildings. They were civilian areas. We have 4 years now of proof that Russia has been targeting civilians. If they were not targeting civilians, they wouldn't be bombing the power grid to try to take out the heat. They're not just bombing the electrical grid, but they're bombing the heat grid, because the way that they heat buildings in Ukraine is by a central boiler that heats water and pumps it out to all the buildings in the neighborhood. And then they pump those through registers in each apartment. And Russia has been bombing those heat plants as well. So it's obvious that actually, I was going to show you a clip of the Russian, about 15 different people from the Russian government right before the invasion saying, no, we're not going to invade. This is stupid. No, this is all just Western talking points. They're saying there's no reason for us to invade. We're not going to invade, but they did. So they have done nothing but lie, but they have managed to lie very convincingly. And many Americans, especially Americans on my side of the aisle, on the conservative side, have swallowed that trope hook, line, and sinker. And I just wish that now on the 4-year anniversary, after seeing 4 years of Russia killing civilians, this last year was the deadliest year for civilians in Ukraine since the war began, that we would be perhaps disabused of those misconceptions that we swallowed, that Ukraine was so corrupt, they deserved it, that sort of thing. If you were to compare the corruption between Ukraine and Russia, Russia is orders of magnitude more corrupt than Ukraine ever was. Vladimir Zelensky was hired to address the corruption, and he has done a lot to root it out, and to include firing and arresting some of his own business associates, some of his own friends who were caught with their hand in the till. He fired the entire officer staff of the recruiting command because they were taking bribes to allow people to avoid military service. So Zelensky at the time the war began had a 91% approval rating. It's not that high now, but you wouldn't expect it to be after 4 years of war. But he is still leading his people. And honestly, if you look at if you understand anything about servant leadership, Vladimir Zelensky has done a fantastic job leading his country through the 4 years of this war. And you know what? In talking to some of his closest advisors, who I'm happen to be friends with now, he would love nothing more than to be able to step down and go back to his business, entertaining people as an actor, and leave all of this behind. This has obviously been incredibly stressful on him for the last 4 years. And so now Vladimir Putin has, he claimed that they had a historical precedent. Ukraine is not really a country. They're actually Russian people. So we need to take them over, even though they don't want to be taken over. We need to take them over in order to bring them back into the fold. What he's trying to do is remake the Soviet Union. So make the Soviet reunion. And that has not gone well for Russia. In the last 4 years, they've lost an estimated 1.2 million men. That's casualties. That's not all dead. That's dead, wounded, missing, and captured. Most of those who are missing, though, are most likely dead. There are very few that would be missing that wouldn't be dead. Russia does not make a habit of collecting their dead on the front line. So many of their families will never have any closure about that, never know. Ukraine has probably had north of 100,000 casualties. The casualty ratio right now is skewed very high toward Ukraine, meaning Ukraine for every one soldier Ukraine loses, right now they estimate Russia is losing 27 soldiers, and they're advancing something like 70 meters a day. That the Russian army is up until last week. And then the Ukrainians, when the Starlink terminals got shut off by Elon Musk, Ukraine turned the tables and counterattacked, and they've retaken something like 400 square kilometers in the last week. So despite the fact that it's been very difficult on Ukraine, that they are definitely in a precarious position right now, suffering through the winter with very little heat. Nobody's freezing to death. They are enduring the hardship, and they are willing to endure the hardship because it would be even worse. The only thing worse than what they're going through now would be to capitulate to Russia. And for that reason, I believe that Ukraine will eventually win this conflict because they can't afford not to. This is existential for them. And Vladimir Zelensky showed his underground bunker for the first time in this video. I'll show you a little bit of it here. I'm going to turn it down because the music will get me demonetized. But so he's showing his office where he conducts a lot of his, business now. Today marks exactly 4 years. It started this 3-day push to take Kyiv. And that, in fact, says a great deal about Russia. They said they were the second most powerful military in the world, and they actually control less territory today than they did 3 weeks after the war started. So the last 3.5 years have not gone well for Russia. And at the rate that they're going, it will take them hundreds of years to take the entire country. Now, I spent about 4 months in Ukraine at the beginning of the war, covering everything, going out to the front lines. And then I've been back once or twice each year since then. Every year, at the beginning of the war, the closest city you could get to that was near the front lines without getting bombed was Kramatorsk. And so I would go to Kramatorsk and report on the war and get in with the military and ride out to the front lines for a day, whatever. 4 years, every time I leave Kramatorsk, I think, well, the next time I come back, it'll probably be in Russian hands, because you can stand on a rooftop in Kramatorsk and hear the fighting on 3 sides of the city. And every time I go back, Kramatorsk is still in Ukrainian hands. And Russia has not made any progress toward Kramatorsk to speak of in the 3 years I've been going back there. To this day, you can go to Kramatorsk and stay in a hotel if you want to. So it's just amazing how poorly they have Russia has done, considering their claim to be the second most powerful military in the world. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that. I mean, we could go on and on. I could do a whole podcast about the 4-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine and all the things that I've seen in Ukraine during this conflict and everything. But y'all have shown me that you just really don't care much about Ukraine. So I don't talk that much about Ukraine, even though it is important. It is the major conflict of my lifetime. It is the biggest conventional conflict of our lifetimes. So I mean, so far, and I believe it does represent the beginning stages of a world war, World War III. So I think it is important, but apparently many of you don't. So we're going to move on. All right. So President Trump has been getting, I wouldn't say mixed signals, I would just say cautious warnings from General Kaine, his, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He calls him Raisin Kaine. He loves that nickname that General Kaine has. General Kaine's job is not to insert his own political agenda or his own opinion into anything that he does in his official capacity. General Kaine's job is to present the president with his options and explain to him the risks and rewards of each choice, and then let the president make his decision. So it's interesting because there were 2 articles that came out in the last 12 hours or so, one from the New York Times and one from the Washington Post. It's 2 major newspapers in the United States, and both of them had a different take on what General Kaine has been telling President Trump. So one of them was along the lines of basically General Kaine has been warning President Trump that the United States is almost out of ammunition. We are very low on our stockpiles of missiles and rockets and things like that. And so it would be a very big risk to get embroiled in a long-term conflict or even a medium-term conflict or even a short-term conflict with Iran. The New York Times, on the other hand, was reporting that General Kaine was telling President Trump that it would be fairly easy for us to win a conflict with Iran. And actually, both things might actually be true. President Trump weighed in on this and kind of excoriated the press for saying that General Kaine was against the war. This is what President Trump had to say on Truth Social. He said, numerous stories from the fake news media have been circulating stating that General Daniel Kaine, sometimes referred to as Raisin, is against us going to war with Iran. The story does not attribute this vast wealth of knowledge to anyone and is 100% incorrect. General Kaine, like all of us, would like not to see war, but if a decision is made on going against Iran at a military level, it's his opinion that it will be something easily won. He knows Iran well, and that he was in charge of Midnight Hammer, the attack on the Iranian nuclear development. It is a development no longer, but rather was blown to smithereens by our great B-2 bombers. Raisin Kaine is a great fighter and represents the most powerful military anywhere in the world. He's not spoken of not doing Iran or even the fake limited strikes that I have been reading about. So he only knows one thing, how to win. And if he's told to do so, he will be leading the pack. Everything that has been written about a potential war with Iran has been written incorrectly and purposefully so. I'm the one that makes the decision. I would rather have a deal than not. But if we don't make a deal, it will be a very bad day for that country and very sadly its people, because they're great and wonderful, and something like this should never have happened to them, President Donald J. Trump. Okay, so there's President Trump uh, ex- explaining his side of things and saying, look, the whole narrative that I'm thinking about a limited strike on Iran to try to push them to the negotiating table is not true. The idea that we're so low on ammunition that we can't win a fight with Iran is not true. And if Iran doesn't come to the table with an acceptable plan, an acceptable, deal, then we are going to war with Iran. So that's essentially what he was saying in that tweet. So now the real question is, will he act on it? Because we have stretched our military big time, especially the poor souls that are stationed on the USS Gerald Ford. They are now looking at the longest at sea deployment in history for a U.S. Navy vessel. We're talking now. I say in history. I don't know if that goes back to the very beginning of our country 250 years ago or whatever, or whenever the Navy was founded, because at that time people would go off to sea for years, but maybe not. They wouldn't be able to stay at sea for as long as a nuclear aircraft carrier can stay at sea. So maybe that's what they're talking about. But what they're saying is that the Gerald Ford is going to be at sea for 11 months by the time this is over. They're now slated to go back in June, and that's causing real morale problems on the ship. Some sailors are saying that they're getting out of the Navy. They're not going to stay in the Navy if it's going to be having them away from their families for so long. That is a really long deployment. But if you think about it, the military's been doing deployments that are a year or more ever since the beginning of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. I remember at the beginning of the war, there were troops that were sent off to that conflict for 14 months, 16 months, 18 months at a time. As a matter of fact, my own son has had 2 deployments during his time in the military. He's out now. Both of those deployments were 10 months each. My son-in-law, my oldest daughter's husband, is an Army JAG officer who is about to deploy overseas for an extended period of time. He's got 2 little boys at home. And so 11 months might seem like a long time to the sailors who are used to having 4-month deployments or 6-month deployments or something like that. But it is, like you say, God bless them. It's a long time to be away from your family. That's really hard. They say that the Gerald Ford also is having some serious sewage problems, and it needs to be repaired, but they don't have time to do the repairs they need to do, et cetera, et cetera. So belies some sort of maintenance issues on the ship. I don't know if that's going to affect operations that much, but it certainly could affect morale if you've got sewage bubbling up through the pipes or whatever. So we'll have to pray for those soldiers or sailors, I mean, on the Gerald Ford. Now, President Trump also said General Kaine only knows how to win, and that would pretty much hold true for any general, for any U.S. military officer that you were to Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My internet died for a minute. What I was saying is that wars are not lost by and large by troops in the field, ever. At least not U.S. wars. Any losses that have happened on the side of the United States have been lost in the halls of power in Washington, D.C., not on the battlefield. So President Trump is correct in saying that Dan Kaine is an officer who only knows how to win, but that's not the question. The question is, will President Trump allow Dan Kaine to win if we do go to war? Or is he going to settle for half measures as politicians are wont to do? Many times politicians, they'll get skittish. They call for a strike. The strike happens, and they don't want to take it to the mat because the level of violence and indeed collateral damage that has to take place in order to actually win, like conclusively win, to get the enemy to beg you to stop, unconditional surrender. We haven't seen a president that's willing to go to the mat like that since the first Gulf War back in the 1990s, President George H.W. Bush. So we'll see if President Trump has the gumption, the wherewithal, and the inclination to order the kind of strikes that it would take to actually fix this problem. And that's really what the question is at this point. Now, what might happen if the United States does have to do this? Well, again, Trump had set a 10 to 15 day window for a meaningful nuclear deal by Iran, or consequences would happen. Well, now he's saying, well, they got 48 hours to come to the table with an acceptable deal. Iran has already said that they're not going to give up their nuclear program. They're not going to give up their missile program. They're not going to stop supporting their proxies. So really, there's no point on which the United States and Iran agree. None. So with that in mind, I don't know what the purpose is of these talks, except for on the Iranian side to draw out and to hold hope alive for the United States and try to make it a more difficult decision for President Trump to order strikes on Iran. So right now, today's the 24th, the deadline expires, that 48-hour deadline expires essentially tomorrow, our time, not your time, late night, the 24th, your time. Iran is still rejecting the deal. They're affirming their right to nuclear enrichment. So they will not accept a zero enrichment policy. They have their military on full alert. They've been moving troops toward the border with Iraq, threatening our bases in Iraq. And so that, that could be a serious escalation. They've also been running drills in the Strait of Hormuz. And so we're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, let's look at the U.S. side. The United States has finalized an understanding with Israel that the U.S. would lead the initial strikes, and then Israel would be pre-authorized to retaliate if they get hit with missiles. Now, this is something I don't understand. What right does the United States have to tell Israel whether or not they can defend themselves? I don't understand this pre-authorization thing. It might just be a semantic issue. What they might be talking about is just they're pre-deconflicting. So they're saying, okay, if you, Israel, have to strike Iran, here's the routes you need to fly. Here's the targets you need to be looking at or whatever, so that we don't overlap or end up running into each other in the air or something like that. So maybe that's what they're talking about. But the way it's being reported is that they've been pre-authorized by President Trump to retaliate if they're hit. And to that, I'd say, why would they need authorization from President Trump to defend themselves? It doesn't make any sense. We have those two carrier strike groups that are arrayed across the area. We now have more than 500 combat aircraft in the region. As I said before, 700 tons of munitions. We have 40 refuelers. We have F-22s, AWACS. We have Patriot missile batteries, THAAD missile batteries. There's a bunch of literal combat ships and destroyers in the area. We evacuated some of our ships from the ports in Bahrain. And we know that not because the United States announced it, but because China announced it. They are putting out or leaking satellite imagery, the Chinese are, showing where U.S. ships are and where they're not. This makes, to my mind, this makes China a willing co-conspirator with Iran. And I would, if I was President Trump, be putting out a message to China and saying, if so help me, if one of our ships gets hit because you guys are passing information to Iran, we're going to sink your targeting ship that's in the area. I don't know why they don't do that already. That targeting ship needs to have an unfortunate accident, and soon, right away. So Trump denies that there's people on his team that are against this. Lindsey Graham says that some of Trump's advisors are pleading with him to show restraint. But as I said, he posted there that he believes any action would be easily won. Now, that's what you would expect him to say. But you've heard me say before that if President Trump if we go to war, this is not going to be a cakewalk. This is not going to be like Venezuela. This is going to be much more serious, and we likely will see U.S. losses of some sort in this conflict if it happens. Now, as I said, Iran has been practicing taking over the Strait of Hormuz or closing the Strait of Hormuz. As a matter of fact, last week they actually partially closed the Strait of Hormuz for these exercises. It's historically never actually been closed before. And if you recall, 20% of the world's oil and natural gas flows through the Strait of Hormuz. So if they were to close the Strait of Hormuz, experts believe that the price of oil would immediately spike to over $100 to $110 a barrel from in the 70s, $70 a barrel now. That would likely be a short-term spike unless the Strait of Hormuz stayed closed for a long period of time. Now, the IRGC does have the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz, at least temporarily. They have more than 5,000 limpet mines or, sea mines that they could dump in the ocean out there. And those would not be easily cleared. It's not like, it'd be super easy to just go clean those up. It would take some time. The United States, you could expect, if the Iranians do move to close the Strait of Hormuz, the United States would likely react in a massive fashion to stop that, sink all of the Iranian Navy, and keep them from doing it. Now, there are some very good reasons why Iran really doesn't want to close the Strait of Hormuz, even if they do get attacked. Number one is because almost 20% of their total GDP comes from energy, oil and natural gas that comes out of Iran through the Strait of Hormuz to their clients like China, India, etc. So they'd be shooting themselves in the foot by closing the Strait of Hormuz. They would also be alienating China to some extent because China needs that oil very badly. They would be raising the costs for China, and not just China, but China, Japan, South Korea, all of the nations out there that are dependent on oil that comes from Iraq and Kuwait and places like that. So they would likely get some serious pressure from China if they closed it, or at least closed it for very long. Now, what the IRGC is saying is that, well, we're not going to close the Strait of Hormuz. We're just going to exercise what they call smart control over the Strait of Hormuz. So their live fire drills they did last week were to close sections of the Strait of Hormuz for safety reasons. an unannounced restriction that just basically would scramble and cause minor shipping delays and reroutes and stuff like that. Again, they have drones, they have missiles, they have fast boats, and they have mines that they could use to try to harm the ships going through the Strait of Hormuz or close it altogether. And Bloomberg is saying that if there is an oil disruption, that Bloomberg is saying right now that crude oil is priced $10 to $20 higher than it should be based on supply, simply because there is a belief that there may be a disruption in the oil market if there's an attack on Iran. So they've already priced $20 a barrel almost into Brent crude. And I would call that a leading indicator that at least some of the smart people who have money on this believe that it might be about to happen. The reason that the price is up that much is because those countries that need oil that comes through the Strait of Hormuz are buying it with both hands as fast as they can right now, just in case there is a disruption in the market. Now, as I said, the United States Embassy in Beirut has been evacuated. Hezbollah, they believe, still has 150,000 rockets that they could rain down on Israel. Israel warned Lebanon that if any rockets come out of their country, there will be very harsh strikes, even on civilian infrastructure, including the airport in Beirut, if Hezbollah joins the conflict. And one thing you can say about the Israelis is that they don't make empty threats. So you can take that one to the bank. There are additional risks from the Iraqi militias, militias in Syria, the Houthis, etc., for additional escalation. And that's basically what's causing the markets to climb a wall of worry, as they are known to do. So where is all this going? Well, Trump has a State of the Union address coming up very, very soon. It's unsure. I mean, a lot of people are saying if he doesn't strike tonight, then he's not going to be able to talk about it in the State of the Union address. I would say he probably doesn't want to talk. He doesn't want to announce a strike in the State of the Union address because there's not enough time to find out if we're winning or not. He missed his window if he wanted to strike Iran and have a conclusive victory to announce during the State of the Union address. So to me, it makes more sense that he would wait until after the State of the Union address and maybe even wait another couple of weeks. But I guess we'll see. I'm going to be over in the region for the next week or so, and we'll be waiting with bated breath to see if President Trump pulls the trigger on this thing or not. Okay, folks, we got more than 2,000 people watching. Do me a favor and go to chuckholton.com. If you liked this content and you've been watching for a while and you want to support what we're doing, we certainly appreciate all of our supporters, and chuckholton.com is the best place to do that. You can send a super chat or a super thanks on here on YouTube, and that's fine. We appreciate all of you who do that as well. What that does is it brings your name up in the chat and highlights it so everybody can see that you gave. YouTube takes a good chunk of that, though, and so if you want us to get the most out of your donation, the best place to do it is over at chuckholton.com. I want to mention that we just crossed 250,000 viewers, subscribers on YouTube about 3 days ago. Now, because we have seen such a spike in growth over the last couple of days because of the coverage we've done on Mexico, we're now actually over 260,000. So we've got another 10,000 just in the last couple of days. But we are celebrating hitting that milestone of 250,000 with some merch and things like that. You can see all of that by going over to chuckholton.com and taking a look at that. And look, that's all because of you guys. You chatting in the chat box and putting where you're watching from and liking this channel, sharing it with your friends on social media. All that stuff has gotten us to this point, and I really appreciate it because it's allowed me to have a lot more flexibility with what I report on, where I go, who I talk to, what kind of stories I tell, and all that. And so that only increases the quality of my reporting for all of you. And so, again, if you want to support us with that, you can get some of this merch on sale, 25% off. That's pretty serious discount on our merchandise right now. And some of this merchandise is specifically limited time because of the 250,000 milestone. So, and you know what? YouTube still will not send me a play button. We should have gotten one when we hit 100,000, but they said, no, you said something about the sickness in 2020 one time, and so we've disqualified you from receiving your play button. I really don't care because that play button and $8 it might get you a cup of coffee in New York, but it's not it's not really worth much more than that to me. Still, it is kind of unfair, I'd say. But I want to get over to comments because we're at 46 minutes already, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about. And I've got to run in about 10 minutes. So let's get to the comments and questions. So first one is, if this is going to be shock and awe for 2 weeks of airstrikes, why wait? Why not limited strikes in the meantime? Good question. Don't know. I mean, we would have been striking a long time ago if I was president. Next question. Does Trump want to finish the State of the Union speech tonight before a round of action? Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is I think at this point it makes more sense that he would want to do it after the State of the Union address, or maybe strike literally during the State of the Union address, like while he's speaking. Say, knowing Trump, I wouldn't put it past him to like live stream it, like hold up an iPad or something and go, "Hey, the strikes just started," that sort of thing. Because that would definitely get the media all in a frenzy. And who knows, might happen. Next question. If the Strait of Hormuz in Iran is closed down, how high do you see gas prices going? I don't know about gas prices. I mean, it doesn't translate directly between the price of crude oil and the price of gasoline, but you could expect them to go up at least temporarily. So we are coming into that summer driving season. And so they're going to be switching over the blend, and all that sort of thing affects the price of gas anyway. But the biggest thing that affects the price of your gas is the taxes that the government charges you on every gallon. So I would say go after your Congress critters to reduce the gas tax. Next, let's get rid of that one. Okay, so there we go. What side is Pakistan on if the United States and Iran go full out war? Pakistan, I would imagine that they are not going to be for attacking a Muslim neighbor, but I don't think that they're going to get involved in any way, if that's what you mean. So you're saying, next question, are you saying that only Russia is lying, doing propaganda? I think the West is doing the same. Well, the West certainly puts out information in order to try to impact people's understanding of the conflict. The good thing for the West is that the truth is the best propaganda they have, and letting the truth get out is the best way to affect public opinion for Ukraine. So I don't think that there's a necessity for the West to publish a bunch of lies. And at least in my experience, looking at the war in Ukraine for the last 4 years, almost everything that has come out of the mouths of the pundits on the Russian side, guys like, Scott Ritter, Colonel McGregor, Galloway, what's that guy, George Galloway. Matter of fact, I even have an image of, let me just see if I can show you that. Where'd that go? There it is. This is from George Galloway, where he said, this is at the beginning of the war, February 14th, 2022, 10 days before the war started. Y'all said Russia was about to invade Ukraine. I told you it wasn't. You were wrong. I was right. Again, show some bloody humility, especially if they're not even paying you to act like an idiot. There was a lot of that sort of thing coming out from guys that are very pro-Russia at the, outset of the war. All of them have been proven wrong. I've got other, I save a lot of these tweets and stuff because they're so ridiculous that I want to be able to go back to them and point them out like I just did and say, hey, look at this guy. This is why you don't want to listen to him. So, for example, Scott Ritter right now is forecasting that if the United States goes to war with Iran, it will be the end of the United States and the end of Israel. And I'm saving those tweets because when Reza Pahlavi goes in and takes charge in a newly liberated Iran, if that happens, you'll see that Israel and the United States still exist. And again, Scott Ritter will be proven wrong. But that's not difficult to do. You can go back and look at all of his tweets for the last 4 years, and virtually everything is just wrong, 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 wrong. It's just crazy how bad he is. Next question. Then why hasn't Ukraine had an election? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in the Ukrainian constitution, it makes it illegal to have an election during wartime. Now, because of the pressure that the president of the United States has put on Ukraine to have an election, President Zelensky has said, fine, I'm fine having an election. The problem is, how do you campaign when everything's being bombed every night? How do you open polling places for people to go to when any conglomeration of human beings is subject to an air raid or a drone attack by Russia? You're asking our people to come together to vote in order to be killed. We need a ceasefire in order to have an election for at least 60 days so that we can, how would you expect anybody to run against me if they can't go out and campaign? And see, don't you understand that? To say nothing of the fact that there are 2 million Ukrainians who are in occupied territories that are occupied by Russia, that how are they going to vote? So what would you expect Ukraine to do? Hold a partial vote where none of the soldiers that are fighting on the front lines have a chance to vote. None of the people who are in occupied territories have a chance to vote. And oh, by the way, it goes against the constitution of Ukraine. So they'd have to have a referendum to change the constitution. And they'd have to vote on that. They'd have to get together. So obviously there are some good reasons why they haven't had an election. Okay. It's not like the United States. Like, we've had an election during wartime. Yeah, because the United States homeland was not under attack. It's ridiculous. All of that. Like, is this hard for you to understand? Is it difficult? It's not difficult for me. It makes total sense to me. Next question. Who will replace Putin? Don't know. Hopefully somebody, and hopefully he's not worse than Putin is. Next question. Do you think there'll be a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia to end the war between Ukraine and Russia in Ukraine? I think that eventually there will have to be, but it's neither. Ukraine doesn't. Ukraine wants a ceasefire, but they're not willing to give up portions of their country that they have fought to control and defend in order to get a ceasefire. And it wouldn't make sense for them to do that because they believe that if they agree to a ceasefire right now, all it will do is give Russia a chance to rebuild its forces, rebuild its manpower, and then attack again. What Ukraine wants is either security guarantees from the West that we won't allow Russia to attack ever again. And I don't know how they could even bring themselves to trust America or the West to give them those kind of guarantees, because we've given them before and we didn't live up to that. But that's what they're saying they want. Russia, on the other hand, is saying, yes, we're gladly agree to a ceasefire as soon as Ukraine gives up and gives us everything we want. So neither side is anywhere close to an agreement yet. And right now, Russia is the one who is hurting more because they don't have support like Ukraine does from the West. Not the United States anymore, but from Western Europe. Next question. Do you think that Russia has used or hasn't used their full military power in fighting Ukraine? Russia has thrown everything they can afford to throw at the war in Ukraine. They have lost more than half of their armor, and that includes the armor they had in storage, meaning they had about 10,000 total tanks. They had about 3,000 tanks that were operational and about 7,000 tanks in storage. Many of those were museum pieces, like 30 years old, but they have cleared out and used up almost all their operational tanks. You don't see tanks on the battlefield very much anymore. Many of their other trucks and vehicles, they've all been destroyed. Russia's Air Force is being whittled down day after day. And they are taking unimaginable losses every month now. 35,000 dead per month, 1,000 dead a day, trying to take 70 meters a day of land. I mean, it's just ridiculous how much blood they are shedding. And now we're hearing that Russian commanders are executing their own troops because the troops are saying, well, we're going to die anyway. We're not going to go die at the hands of the Ukrainians. We're not going to fight in some cases. So we're hearing that from captured Russians, right? Next question. Hasn't Ukraine been, we already did that one, Nate. Hasn't Ukraine been amassing powerful missiles for several months now, and haven't they used, well, they actually did a massive strike a couple days ago on a facility that was deep inside of Russia, actually the longest missile strike yet in this war by Ukraine, over 1,400 kilometers that their missiles had to fly to strike this plant. And it's a plant that makes many of the missiles, the Caliber missiles and the Oreshnik missiles that Russia has in their arsenal. And they struck it with multiple of their Flamingo long-range missiles. So yes, they are making use of those things, and they are having an effect on Russia pretty big time. Next question. Why is Trump so willing to save the Iranian people from an Islamic regime, but he won't do anything about the Islamic takeover here in the United States? I don't know that you could say that there's a takeover in the United States, except in some places like Dearborn and New York and some parts of Texas, maybe. But it's a fair point. You got a valid question there. Next question. Politicians in America don't do their job. What gives them the right to put their nose into war? I'm not sure what you're asking there. President Trump is the one who is in control of whether or not we're going to go to war right now. Obviously, I'd like it if he followed the rule of the law and got approval from Congress, but it'd be very difficult to do that, most likely. The Congress is so divided, and it's all but worthless, really. And President Trump wouldn't be able to get anything done if he had to get the okay from Congress to do it. So he's going to do it himself if he does it. Do you think they will put the Nimitz back in service, keep it in the Caribbean? Good question. I don't know. I haven't even looked at that. Don't have any idea. Question, what's an acceptable deal? Well, Steve Witkoff says the president is very frustrated with Iran because he thought that by building up all these forces in the Gulf, it would bring Iran to the table and they would be willing to actually make a deal. And I think some articles are saying President Trump has painted himself into a corner because he never expected to actually have to use these troops. He thought just by taking them all over there and threatening Iran with them, that Iran would capitulate and come to the table. It's Steve Witkoff's words talking to a Fox host yesterday. And that didn't happen. So President Trump is like, now they called my bluff. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. Has Pakistan pledged not to share a bomb? No. Pakistan has a nuclear bomb. I don't know that they've pledged not to share it, but it would be very bad for them if they did. There's no reason for them to want to share their bomb. But it's not like they have 100 of them. I think they have one. Your thoughts on an EMP? Electromagnetic pulse is a definite threat to the United States. All it would take is for one of our adversaries to detonate a nuclear device in space over the United States, and the resulting electromagnetic pulse would take out anything electronic that isn't shielded inside the continental U.S. I did a documentary about that several years ago, and you can see that documentary if you go over to chuckholton.com and become a supporter. So go check that out. Next question. So Iran's response would be a massive land invasion of the region. Is this what they're scared of? Well, I don't know that they would send troops into Iraq. I don't know that Iraq would go for that. And if they did, they would be absolutely annihilated by American air power. The one thing that Iran, you never want to do, Iran or anybody else, is send ground troops in someplace where you do not have control of the skies and the enemy does. Because if the United States controls the skies, they are going to wipe the floor with any ground force that tries to come at our bases. More likely, what they would do is they would fire short-range missiles at American bases inside Iraq, and that's why they're massing near the border, because those missiles only have a limited range. Okay. Next question. Isn't PM Modi on a state visit to Israel until February 26th? Also, will the USA attack under moonlight? Well, I've talked about this before, that Americans would prefer to attack at a new moon when it's darkest. But if you look at, for example, the attack that we did in Venezuela, there was a full moon during that attack. So it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just a preference more than anything. So I don't know that you can really gauge. We talked about it, like the next time that there will be a new moon will be right after the end of Ramadan in the middle of March. And so maybe we will wait that long. I don't know. It's not that far from now, but we're burning about $6 million a day for each carrier we have in the Gulf out there, making hot water in the region. So I maybe President Trump will wait that long. Maybe he won't. It's a good question. Does America have its own intel, or does it trust Israeli sources? I wouldn't, as Israel is hard on for a war. America does have its own intel sources. Israel has its own intel sources. We share between each other. And so I think it's good for both parties. Okay, next. Where are the cruisers? Don't we have any cruisers anymore? Nobody ever mentions them. Well, I believe that there are, I don't know. I don't know that much about the Navy. I wasn't in the Navy, sorry. Why was Midnight Hammer so easy compared to the upcoming conflict? Because Midnight Hammer was a one-night affair. Literally, it took a half an hour. We dropped all our bombs, and then we left. That was it. So, we had a very, very, very limited scope. An attack on Iran this time will have a much broader scope and will take a lot more aircraft and a lot more sorties. And it's going to be spectacular if it happens. What China is doing, sharing satellite pics for Iran, is the same as U.S. is doing for Ukraine. Does some perspective apply? Well, if you are amoral about the conflicts in question, then yes, it would, be, roughly comparable. But I'm not amoral about it. I believe that Ukraine has the moral high ground in that conflict, and so we should be helping Ukraine. We should be standing up against the aggressor. And in this case, with Iran, I believe the United States and Israel have the moral high ground, and so it is. And so that means Iran does not, and China sharing information with the bad guys in this situation. I believe, hey, call me Pollyannic, but I truly believe that there are good guys and there are bad guys out there. It's not all just like flavors of ice cream. Okay. What war do we ever have zero soldiers dying? Well, the operation in Venezuela is one I can point to. We had a couple wounded, but nobody died. And almost never, very, very, very seldom would we have an operation where no American troops are killed. And that's why the president should be very circumspect and thoughtful about sending us to war. Next question. In your opinion, Chuck, does Iran have a dirty bomb and will they use it? They have material to build a dirty bomb, I don't know that using a dirty bomb would be in their best interest in any way, shape, or form. Uh, it would only provoke a much more massive response against them, and it would almost ensure that the regime gets toppled. So the regime might do that as a, just last gasp. They know they're going down and they're going to take everybody else down with them. But even a dirty bomb, it takes some doing to make. And so I don't think it is possible. I just don't think it's really likely. Okay. Why are the pros of America attacking Iran, and are they doing it on behalf of Israel? Pros? I don't know what you mean by pros, Robert. So let's move on. Let me get it right from, if Iran is hit, they will act against Israel and the Gulf states. Really, that gives you another 500 fighters and bombers. I think they bluff. Well, Iran definitely bluffs. That's part of their culture. That's part of what Muslim armies always do, is they talk a big game and then they don't really back it up. So we'll have to see. Did you see all the earthquakes in the past 6 months? I've seen some. I get a alert on my phone whenever there's an earthquake. Diane Britson says, Frankfurt still? Yeah, we missed our flight out last night, and so we got another one tonight. So we're going to leave here in a minute. Do you think Israel has a deadline to bomb Iran no matter what President Trump does? Israel doesn't necessarily have a deadline, but they do have a red line, meaning if they see with their intelligence that Iran is, about to strike, or if they have rebuilt their missile fabrication capacity to a point where Israel believes it threatens them, Israel has already reserved the right to strike Iran again. So I don't think gas prices in the USA to go up, as USA has a gas surplus. Yeah, there is a real surplus of fuel, even at sea, all around the globe right now. But the prices don't track immediate supply and demand. They track perceived supply and demand, going forward a little bit. So this regime change war will work. Well, it could if we take it to the mat, if we do what we have to do to win. Why do I feel that's just a very expensive bluff? I just believe Trump will chicken out and Israel will go it alone. How do you feel about this? I just hope not. It'll be very bad for President Trump and for America if he doesn't go through with this at this point. Unfortunately, he has not left himself many good options. And so if he is afraid to go to war at this point, we're gonna have problems. Next, how can Iran go full out war if the USA and Israel don't invade with ground troops, but only bomb from the air? Well, it won't be full scale war. Full scale war would be air, land, and sea. But we will definitely be taking it to them by sea and by air. We don't really have any need or desire to go in with troops on the ground. We don't want to control Iran. We just want to topple the regime and give the people of Iran their country back. So what's the point of any allied Arab nations having decent armies with U.S. tech if they're not willing to use them against a common enemy? It shouldn't be just USA and Israel fighting jihad. Well, we have had help from Jordan and Saudi Arabia in the past, but they were saying, we don't want to help this time. But yesterday, Saudi Arabia changed their tune and said, you know what? We think regime change would be the best thing to happen. So it's okay. We will support or allow the United States to overfly Saudi Arabia if they want to. Chuck, I read that Shia Najaf Ayatollah Ali Sistani is considering a fatwa in event of war without any impact given his position in Shia Islam. He's done those before and they haven't had much effect. So I don't think so. How does what is happening in Iran work with The end game, end time prophecies, that's a much longer conversation. And I don't like to get into end time prophecies because I'm not an expert on that subject. So I'll pass on that question. St. Evaniquez says, who pays that guy? I don't know if you're referring to me. If you are.
Talking about, what's his name? Scott
Galloway?
No, Scott Ritter.
Yeah, Russia does. I've been able to track down that Russia pays Scott Ritter through a marketing firm in the United States that is essentially a wholly owned subsidiary of the Russian government. Maybe the U.S. wouldn't have midterms if we were at war. Well, we would have midterms unless the United States itself was under attack. If there was 1 million Chinese soldiers on American territory, let's say that they had taken over California and Nevada, it'd be a little difficult for us to have an election if millions of U.S. citizens were behind enemy lines and wouldn't be able to get out to vote, right? So that's the whole point with Ukraine. Do you think Iran purposefully held back to full capability during the 12-day war? I don't think Iran did. I think, other than the fact that they were probably pressured to do so by the United States, there was some point. You remember President Trump famously dropped the F-bomb when he said that Iran doesn't know what the F they're doing. I'm sorry, Israel doesn't know what the F they're doing in a speech, which I think is really gross. That's not becoming of a president or any man, as far as I'm concerned. But President Trump was putting serious pressure on Israel not to continue their bombing campaign because President Trump wanted to be able to declare that he had won and declare a ceasefire and unilaterally just make it happen through force of will. Question, how do you think we can change the current anti-Israel culture in the USA? How do we get people to understand who the true enemy is? I think we just have to keep telling the truth and not be afraid to do so. Not be afraid to stand up and say, I'm a Zionist. I believe that Israel has a right to exist. That's all being a Zionist means. As Israelis, Jews have a right to their own country. What's taking so long for President to call a strike on the Ayatollahs in Iran? They say 80,000 Iranian civilians have been murdered already. Yeah, we don't know the exact number, but that's a rhetorical question at this point because only President Trump knows why he hasn't called a strike yet. There's a lot of speculation, but only he knows. Can anyone remember the code at the store 250? Maybe Nathan can put that graphic up again. 250K sale. That's the code, 250K sale. Next question. Will the U.S. Air Force attack Iran under moonlight? They will if they're ordered to. Moonlight or not, they'll do what they're told to do. Do you think Donald Trump will pay for his mostly talk with no action in the midterms? Yes, I do. Absolutely. Thank you for that super sticker from, is that North Korea? What is that, NOK? I'm not sure what NOK is, but thank you so much for that. They're very kind. Will Putin use nuclear weapons? They keep threatening to do so. They've threatened about a dozen times or more during this war to use nuclear weapons. It does not benefit Russia in any way to use them. So there's very few scenarios where using a nuclear weapon would help Russia and not hurt it. Most likely it would destroy Russia, and Putin knows that. Okay. Do you think if President Trump had his choice, the mission he canceled would have gone forth? I don't know. It's a good question. Next, is there always one or two cruisers in a carrier battle group? I'm not exactly sure what the makeup is. I know there are a bunch of destroyers and other ships that are part of the carrier strike groups. I don't know the exact makeup. New American Dream, 8 years of Chuck in the White House. Chuck 2028, just my pretext to send money to the jail. Thank you for that. But I'll just say there is not enough Secret Service protection in the world to protect me from my wife if I ran for president. She would not go for that. That's true. Next question. When do you sleep? When I get tired. And I'd sleep in small chunks. And I sleep on airplanes. So that I get plenty of sleep. Will China invade Taiwan when the U.S. invades? We don't know. I've done a whole podcast about that recently. You can go watch. Thank you for that Canadian $1.49 super sticker. Appreciate you. And the question is, will Israel strike Iran before the U.S.? Only if they think they have no other choice, I think is the best answer for that question. Last question. Do you think Trump could be forced to pull back on strikes if the U.S. suffers too many casualties? That's probably, I guess is the best answer I can give you there. Probably. If let's say that somehow, God forbid, Iran managed to strike in a way that caused 1,000 U.S. troops to die or something like that, President Trump might really feel the heat to find a way to declare victory and get out of that, extricate himself from this corner he's painted himself into. Okay, well, thank you very much for all of your questions and for being a part of the Hot Zone today. I'm going to call it right there because I am supposed to be out of the hotel 18 minutes ago, and they're going to be knocking on my door any minute telling me to leave, and I got to clean up still. So God bless you. We'll see you next time from Armenia. So stay tuned. We're going to be reporting. And if there is a strike, come back to this channel because I'll be going live right away to talk about it. All right. God bless you. We'll see you next time.